Well, for more on that story and the government's response to recent anti-Semitic attacks, we're joined by Labor MP Peter Khalil, who's also the Special Envoy for Social Cohesion, appointed by the Prime Minister. Good morning to you,
Morning,
Peter.
morning, Bridget. Morning, Michael.
Social cohesion's at a pretty low point right now, isn't it?
There's a lot of challenges that we're facing. That's very true. Interestingly enough, the Scanlon report that came out recently also showed that there was quite a bit of resilience around social cohesion. There's still a very, very strong percentage of people who support our multicultural society, and so there's some resilience in what we've built up over many decades, and I think that's been because of the good faith and the goodwill of so many Australians. But yes, currently we're under a number of challenges, and it's incumbent upon, I think, all of us, government, community leaders, to actually meet those challenges and try and work our way through this difficult period.
How worried are you by the escalating, and escalating is the right word to use, number of anti-Semitic attacks in Australia?
It's really distressing for the Jewish Australian community, for the broader Australian community. There's been, I think, a 300% increase in anti-Semitic attacks, and of course we've seen this escalate to arson attacks and a designated terrorist attack just recently. It is of great concern, and I think what our role is to support communities, to the Jewish Australian community, which is to provide the protection and the funding for protection of places of worship like synagogues and community centres and schools, but also to set the normative standard that no Australian should be attacked because of their faith identity. People will have differences of views, Michael. We all have differences in disagreement. We have different political views, different ideological views, and people have a right to express those freely, as long as it's done peacefully and respectfully. When it crosses over into hate speech or vilification of others based on their identity, or violence, or worse, that is not just unacceptable, it's morally reprehensible, and I think it's incumbent upon governments to set that normative standard, to lower the temperature, to set the right cultural standards, but also leaders across community as well.
Yep. Is it fair to say you've got some relationships to repair with the Jewish community as a government, given some people have said they felt they were raising many concerns before these attacks happened?
Well, the government has been engaging with the Jewish Australian community for a long period of time. In fact, some of the support that has been put in place, some $60 million in protection of synagogues and schools and facilities, was 13 months ago. And there's been an ongoing engagement, and there's been obviously a legislative response as well, with hate laws that have been passed and anti-doxing laws, the appointment of Gillian Siegel as the Anti-Semitism envoy, and even, as you saw most recently, a very quick response to set up Operation Avalite, which is a joint task force to deal with the terrorist attacks. Government can always do better, absolutely. I've been speaking consistently with leaders, community leaders from the Jewish community as well, to hear their concerns. And the really important point is supporting the community, but also setting that standard across society, that whatever's happening overseas, whatever is happening on the other side of the world, that is no excuse for any form of terrorism, any form of attack on someone based on their faith or their ethnicity. I mean, one of the great things about Australia's relatively harmonious multicultural society is that we all come from different parts of the world, we all have different views, but we should navigate those differences peacefully and respectfully. And there is an obligation to that free expression, that is to do that without crossing that line.
Anne Ali, one of your colleagues, was on the show earlier, and she agrees 100% with you that more needs to be done to stamp out anti-Semitism. But she says, as a Muslim, she and members of her community have been targeted as well. Yep. As somebody deeply involved in improving social cohesion, what's the level of Islamophobia like at the moment?
There's been an increase in Islamophobia, and many of the Palestinian community that I've been speaking to, the Muslim Australian community across the country, and the leadership that I've been speaking to, there's real issues with discrimination in that community as well. As I said, we're facing challenges, and there is unfortunately a small number of people who think it is legitimate to use violence as a form of expression, or to use hate speech as a form of their expression. That's unacceptable, whether it's an attack on a Muslim Australian, a Hindu Australian, a Jewish or a Christian Australian, or even an atheist Australian. People can express their views, and they have a right to protest, and I've been a big supporter of the fundamental democratic right to protest. It's a fundamental democratic right of every Australian citizen. But with it comes the obligation to do so peacefully and respectfully, and not, and there's been a small number of incidents where that's crossed over into hate speech.
Yeah. There's a key vote at the UN today regarding a couple of issues, but one of them is calling for an immediate and permanent ceasefire in Gaza. I asked Anne Ali this earlier this morning. Is Australia joining in a sort of a global coalition of countries which are concerned about Israel's actions in the Middle East, and are our stances on Israel hardening? I
like how you're talking to Anne, the two Egyptians, Egyptian Australians, myself and Anne Ali. We're sort of dominating this morning, but Australia's been very consistent in its foreign policy position. We voted for a ceasefire 12 months ago at the UN and have done so a number of times. It's based on core principles. We want to see an end to the war, a return of all hostages, an end to the human suffering. So there's also been support for the access to unimpeded access to humanitarian aid, and now increase in humanitarian aid. And there were some 152 countries that have voted for those resolutions in the General Assembly. I think that is Australia's foreign policy has been very consistent in that respect. That we want to see. I think everyone wants to see end of the war and a return of the hostages over there. There are many things that we can do at the international level, and we're working with our partners to do so. Australia has limitations on how much it can move the dial, but we can work with the international community at the UN.
OK, Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. And Michael, good luck with whatever you do next.
Thank you. Well, listen, I was going to wait until later, but I'll announce now I'm going into politics. I'm setting up my own independent party. It's called the Michael Rowland Dad Joke Party. Vote for me, you'll get a dad joke.
Vote one.
I like it.
I don't think I'll get too many votes.
I might give you my preference.
There you go. My people will speak to your people,
Preference
Peter.
deal, yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael.